Welcome to the Challenging the Way We Age podcast, hosted by the Mavericks of Senior Living, Francis and Catherine, focusing on creativity, ingenuity, and inspiration to educate and inspire changes in the senior experience, breaking the status quo and creating hope for the way we age. We want to thank our title sponsor during Denver Startup Week 2019, iAging. We want to thank our supporters, Assured Assisted Living, Serenity App, Sevens Home Care, Sevens Residential Memory Care, and Workability Co-working Space. Now get ready for the next episode.
Good afternoon, you Mavericks. I'm Francis Lagasse, your Chief Curiosity Maverick, and we are here at Workability, and I'm here with
Catherine Wells, your Chief Inspiration Maverick.
And we have a fantastic guest with us today, Mr. John Kelley, the CEO of CereHealth. So, Mr. Kelley, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So, can you tell us a little bit about CereHealth?
Well, CereHealth is a company that has two key components to it. One is utilizing the most advanced functional imaging in the world, meaning taking a look at how the brain's performing. Something like an MR or CT will do structure, and we do that extremely well. But the second component is once you have that imaging data, it's interesting to be able to compare it to your blood work, your genealogy background, your cognitive testing. So we run at the highest level algorithms that run pattern matching to see if you look like another patient that had toxic poisoning or ADD. So it's cutting edge in the country right now.
It's really mind-blowing when you think about what you're trying to do. And I remember hearing about you last year at, I think it was the Social Impact Marketplace. How did you come across doing this?
Well, I have a really long history, starting with Xerox, Palo Alto Research Center, all the way through the telecommunication, mainframe, software, cloud computing arena. That's been my area of competency. So as you might expect, somebody like me might be intrigued from a curiosity perspective to see how it might be able to be applied to things like healthcare. So I joined a board called CereScan to see if I could add technical expertise to these brain diagnostic people. And unfortunately, the CEO passed away. I had recently been in a company that was acquired, so I stepped in as the CEO in a healthcare company, which I had no background, but the data side of it is emerging in healthcare, artificial intelligence, pattern matching, precision medicine, all of those things, and it actually started coming back to my area of expertise. So I've stayed on.
That's awesome.
And that makes sense because I think that's what the insurance companies are looking for,
That's
right?
correct.
They need to have some data to be able to look at whether they want to cover these kinds of things. And that's what makes it accessible to the general population, is if it's covered by medical insurance. Can you talk a little more about that?
Yes. In fairness to the insurance world, as it relates to psychiatric symptoms, it's been highly subjective. There's cognitive assessments, there's neurological testing, there's family history that's examined, and it tends to be a crapshoot trying to figure out what's really wrong. Unfortunately, in my opinion, medications were thrown at as the first line of offense. Now, it could work, but by and large, what we've seen, in the vast majority of cases, meds aren't always the answer. What is the answer needs to be discovered, and you can't really solve a problem if you can't identify and quantify that problem. So we've been on the mission to try to quantify as much subjective data, objectify it, as it relates to psychiatric symptomologies and others. So give them a basis from which then to measure the efficacy of a drug or measure the efficacy of a hyperbaric chamber effort, and we can do that today.
Wow.
And can you talk more about what CereScan is and what it does?
Well, the real primary mission is to give patients the peace of mind and the confidence that someone knows what's wrong with their brain disorders.
That would be unbelievable if you can do that.
Yeah.
So how do you go about doing that?
So it's really built around what we've seen in cardiology and oncology. So let's use cardiology. They're going to get EKG. They're going to do a stress test. They're going to do blood analytics. They likely could do a CAT scan or MR. The cardiologist try to collect as much information about the heart and the things that are flowing through the heart as possible. And they want to have a predictor, like for cholesterol, for stroke, other heart disease. So in the medical world, that's been done. If you think about it in the brain world, not the case. You have neurology, great on Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, Lewy bodies. I mean, they're after diseases. Psychiatric, ADD, bipolar, OCD, and depression. Those two professions are never smashed together in terms of sharing data and information. And does one disorder cause a psychiatric symptom, or is a psychiatric symptom leading to other functional disorders? Then throw in radiology, and then throw in oncology, because you could have glioblastoma or something like that. You've got a hodgepodge of highly skilled people who are subject matter experts in their defined area in the brain, and you don't see a collaboration or data collection inherently in that process. And you definitely don't see it in population health. So you may go in and get a diagnosis that could be done, but it is not the case where you're going to get an expectation of having it be compared to patients just like you.
Wow, that's so important though. I mean, because I'm a big believer, even when someone's aging, if you're missing some mental health issues or things that could affect how they're aging and how they want to age, and they might not be able to express it if they have a dementia or Parkinson's that we never treated.
That's exactly right. And studies are a way to do that. So we have, because of FDA approval for much of what I described, it's a gigantic check the box. So in the medical world, it gives us huge credibility to go and say, we've made it through the FDA gauntlet. It's a ticket to play.
Gotcha.
But when we have that, then we can say, with some scientific validation, that if you try a treatment for early dementia, and we're able to give you highly specific, 1 million data points in a brain, and that treatment is employed, and after 6 months, we can take a look at that same brain and compare 1 million data points to 1 million data points to see if there was any change in metabolic or perfusion levels. Is there increased blood flow? Is there increased activity? So it starts to tie together the science around, is that treatment effective, and who is it effective with?
I'm blown away. I'm
you are speechless,
because
Francis.
because I work in that dementia Alzheimer's area, and I feel like they just try drugs,
Yeah.
and we don't know if it works or not. Yet I almost get worried sometimes, are we over medicating some of our seniors that have a dementia diagnoses, whether that's Lewy body, frontal temporal, Alzheimer's? And this would be amazing to know, like, this treatment we've seen work with this dementia, but don't use it for whatever that dementia. I mean,
That's correct.
That's
I
awesome.
mean, every person's body reacts differently to different treatments.
Right.
Drugs obviously being one of those, but lifestyle, genetic predisposition.
Yeah.
There's a current course of thinking in the Boston corridor that inflammation in certain areas of the brain results from an attack by an Alzheimer's or a dementia, and the brain responds. Now, I'm not a doc, but a lot of people believe that beta amyloid plaque, which could be an indicator of that, is a result of the inflammation, the body's response. It is not very effective so far.
Right.
And in many cases, all of us have beta amyloid plaque, and we don't have AZ, we don't have Alzheimer's disease. So why is that? And now we're kind of like CSI. We're tearing apart the pieces of the puzzle and looking at them objectively, drawing no irrational conclusions, but saying, let the data surface on patients like you.
That's awesome.
And you're the first people doing this, correct? So you're really
that's crazy.
forging the
It's
path.
just crazy for us to say that. But I can tell you without fail, back at the FDA, or with the Harvard, Boston, MIT corridor, or going out to California and speaking with leading groups in what we're doing, it looks to be cutting edge. I would say it's common sense. Should have been done 20 years ago.
You can say a lot about
Yeah.
that.
Right? Why weren't,
Yeah.
we drawing sophisticated blood panels? And I'm not talking about what you get with LabCorp and Quest Diagnostics, which I do part of my physical. I'm talking about the proteomic, metabolite, DNA, and antibodies. Knowing about antibodies, maybe your antibodies may be better than my antibodies, which is fighting off this invasion of infection, whether that's herpes, staph, Alzheimer's. Is it an infectious process? And my antibodies, do a better job than you because I'm genetically programmed to have that. That makes sense, right? So let's
It
go.
does.
It sounds good, but now we have to prove the hypothesis, and you can do that. We're one of the participants at Sarah Health and using CereScan to make that happen.
This is something I've thought's been needed, and you actually explained it very eloquently, so I appreciate that, because I don't think I don't have a medical background, medical degree per se, but it helps to hear that you're attacking this with common sense.
Well, let me tell you a story, and I'll try to make it short.
No, you're good.
This is just recent. So a family from Orange County, son, roughly 22, going to Cedars-Sinai, great hospital, was at the severe end of the psychosis and a battery of psychotropic drugs.
Okay.
According to the parents, the son was more in a drug state. In other words,
More
they drug him to go to
comatose.
sleep,
Yep.
drug him to wake him up,
Yep.
aversion to certain drugs, bad reactions. Some of them did not seem to work over time. He was basically house-ridden. Affluent parents. So they, after a few years, I talked to the father, so I'm repeating what the father said. They took him to Mayo, Scottsdale. He said it was a $40,000 to $45,000 4-day workup.
Wow.
At the end of it, by and large, Mayo doctors confirm their colleagues at Cedars-Sinai. Okay? So they did not give up. They found us on the internet, flew into Denver, came to our Littleton office. The child's brain disorder history was cataloged. Blood work was done. Neuro and cognitive testing was done, which happened to be out of Stanford. And then we did this really sophisticated imaging. So as it turned out, they said, well, who does my son look like? And he looked like roughly 20 patients who had had carbon monoxide poisoning.
Oh my gosh.
Okay.
I got
So the
chills.
father tells me, I'm out of the office.
Okay.
The father said he has to use our conference room. He calls and has a carbon, person come in and check the furnace. And came in. The guy calls back and says, I'm surprised anybody in your house is alive.
Wow.
The son was living, or his room was closest to the furnace.
Oh, it just gives me chills.
They had been taking and replacing the batteries in their carbon monoxide detector, thinking they were faulty. This young man was getting slowly but surely poisoned to death by carbon monoxide.
Oh my
It wasn't a continuous event, it was only when it was engaged. So here's a case where this young guy was not psychiatrically impaired, he was brain poisoned. Now, that's a one case.
Still one.
Right, but we've done 72 mercury poisoning people in Alabama and Tennessee that have been exposed in an industrial process to mercury. We can tell you there's patterns associated with mercury poisoning. Lead poisoning goes to specific regions of the brain, so we would be ripe to help, arguably the folks in Michigan, right? So,
Yes. Yeah.
So environmental issues, as we've seen, can cause psychiatric-like conditions.
Yeah, that almost brings up more like, what don't we know? What do we think is a dementia? What do we think is
Absolutely.
Could it be an environmental? Could it be something else that we're missing because it's dementia?
Well, just from your work on this thing that there's a lot of falls. People with dementia or Alzheimer's fall a lot.
Yeah.
They could have a predisposition and be on a way to a certain dementia. But they could also have brain damage, like traumatic brain injury, that could exacerbate the situation. There's 400 miles of capillaries in your brain. Did you know that?
No.
That's
No.
something.
All
I'd
right.
make a note of that.
400. So they're teeny tiny. If they become impaired, whether they're torn from like a whiplash, they're crushed from a concussion, or they're corroded, let's say it's beta amyloid plaque, how does blood get to that area of the brain? It doesn't.
Oh,
And when it doesn't, how would you like to have a cut and not have any blood to get there? It could get infected.
Right.
It doesn't heal properly, and the brain is no different. So there's a lot of work here that needs to be done relative to the dynamics of the brain, and it is highly sensitive, and you could have these issues that I just described. It all requires now research to pull it out, but we're poised with 4,800 patients to do that, and are aligning ourselves I'm going to use Boston University as an example, where we're in collaboration with an Alzheimer's study based out of Harvard, actually.
That's awesome.
Around sleep apnea.
Yep, that's cool. Wow.
And how long have you been in business?
So the company was actually formed in the throes of the meltdown in 2009.
Okay.
I came in later for that. So effectively, the revenue generation's been about 9 years starting, 8 or 9 years.
Still awesome work,
Okay.
though.
Yeah, the work that you're doing is very important, and really I would say it's the epitome of what we are doing here as
Yeah.
Mavericks, really paving the way and looking at things and saying, why hasn't this been done
So you're going to
before?
get excited about this. We are a private company.
Okay.
We have not gotten NIH money.
Wow.
We've done this with private investors like me. I think I'm second or third largest investor.
Okay.
It's taken a bunch of money. But our goal is to be like a Salesforce.com, where you have a doctor in Alamosa would be able to go online, call it $100, and be able to say, look, I've got this patient, maybe it's hantavirus, down in the southwest part of the state, or maybe, they were exposed to lead in the water because of a mine tailing accident. And rather than them having to trek up to Anschutz or some other place, that they'd be able to take their information and data, do sophisticated blood work, do cognitive testing, perhaps get imaged, and be able to go do pattern matching through the cloud.
That's so cool.
Without having to go through all that rigmarole. So we are set up to do that today.
I mean,
That's unbelievable.
So basically, you'll get a database of baselines and
Yeah.
comparables that you can just match.
Yep. But here's the point. We should bring this kind of stuff at the lowest common denominator for anybody who can afford it. This should not be the purview of the rich. It should not be the purview of the guy who flew in with his kid from Orange County. This information can help save lives. You can make money and do good at the same time.
That's what Catherine
You are
and
speaking
I
our
are speaking
language.
So with that being said, how can we help? What helps make this more feasible for the public to get involved or to get to have this more readily
Have
available?
access.
So the FDA approval was about a year and a half ago.
Okay.
So now we're able to talk about it publicly.
Okay.
And things like this are helpful. And some of our team go out and speak. So we're trying to make people aware that they should not give up hope. We are the ultimate, if there's hope on brain disorders, we're it today. And they've come from almost every state, multiple countries. So we're kind of the Stedman Hawkins of brain in the country right now.
Cool.
And others need to catch up. So
Yeah.
we're willing to share if we can move the healthcare process along.
That's
We
awesome.
want to protect our data and algorithms.
Of course.
But in case of, I'm in New Orleans, and my son went through, one of the hurricane events where he started, inhaling fumes from one of the broken gas lines. We would like to be able to say, look, for $100, you can get a diagnosis that has a high degree of reliability, that for your doctor to go explore those things. It shouldn't be a $45,000 workup it should be able to say, let's narrow this down and zero in on it. And you can only do that with good data, good science, and that's what we're about.
That's awesome.
And there's so many areas
So
of
many.
human life that you can affect with that.
At
many.
all ages too, not just all ages. That's
Yeah.
just absolutely.
Yeah, but can you imagine the impact on Alzheimer's?
It's huge.
We were at the walk this weekend, and just the numbers are so staggering. And you look at the people who are out there for the Alzheimer's, the Walk to End Alzheimer's, and it's both sad and hopeful at the same time. It's very sad that there are thousands and thousands and thousands of people out there because they've all been affected by it. They're being ruined financially. Their families are under tremendous stress. And yet at the same time, it's great because of the hope. And you're adding to that hope,
Right.
in my opinion, with what you're talking
And
about.
I totally agree. And I think the part that makes me feel the best is going back to the medication, is finally getting a sense as to if this med is actually working, or are we doing it more for the placebo effect because we think we have to do that.
Catherine, I totally agree with you, and I have 2 points to make of this. One is, there are times when it's I'll use frontal temporal dementia. That's really not a good situation. And so when you walk out of the office, at least you know what's there, but you know that there's a problem that likely is going to deteriorate pretty rapidly. Right?
Right.
So we do have share of those. But the fact of the matter is, on a lot of the dementias, early diagnosis can lead to perhaps some interventions, whether it's diet, lifestyle, don't eat fatty foods, whatever the glutathione, whatever the doctors think. You really want to improve the quality of life, because we all are going to pass away of something.
Yes,
Let's
sir.
say we're predisposed for the dementia side of it. But don't you want to have as many good years as possible and slow roll it? So I believe that we're in a position to help the medical industry figure out how to improve the quality of life, right?
That's amazing.
So that in and of itself is a big deal. Second thing, I have 2 aunts passed away of the complications of Alzheimer's. So Namenda and Aricept, 2 drugs.
Yep.
All right.
Yep.
Know them well.
Our folks would say, my family would say, I don't know if that worked. I have no clue whether it did or not. It didn't seem to improve the situation. But when I ask, Lily or anybody else, well, how did that drug get to that area? If your capillaries, those 400 miles, are clogged, exactly what is the mechanism to get Namenda and Aricept to that area? And if you can't get there, how do you
Then
know
it
if the
can't
drug is
work.
working?
Right.
Now, catching it early would be their argument, but how do you know that? So once you have these symptoms that occur, it may be that the beta amyloid plaque or whatever else is really cause an impediment for the delivery of a drug that might work. Might. There's
makes
902, when I was in Boston 2 or 3 months ago, 902 failed drug trials for Alzheimer's at that time. How many successes? 0. That's a lot. And, I really think the industry needs to look at what's going wrong with 902 times it didn't work out. And there are $500 million to $1.1 billion per trial. So it's not working in mouse models. You can't get the drug to the delivery point. The population was the wrong one that you were looking at. They were too far advanced. I don't know. But common sense would say 902 times in a row, something's not working here. It needs to be looked at.
And to
differently.
come back to a point you made earlier about collaboration, there was something that you said on the panel discussion about that particular trial, or one of the trials, where there were some things that were going well, but not well enough, so they were kind of discarded. Can you
That's right.
talk more about that?
I'll use practical example. Four women on my mom's side. 2 passed away from Alzheimer's, 2 not. The 2 middle ones, no. Why is that? So let's look at what are the common factors of their physiological and biological makeup. Why did 2 not get it when it should be something genetically you would assume be passed on?
Right.
So what are the characteristics of where there's success? And in the case of drug trials, too often there are some drugs where it worked with a small population, but not enough for the FDA approval, not enough for the criteria of the drug company. So why don't I go look at the 17% of the people where it worked, and there may be the secrets there. Because those 17 may have good antibodies. Those 17 may have certain genetic characteristics. Those 17 may have had lifestyle kinds of things. A lot of the research is around, well, they drank wine in Italy and Sicily.
Right.
Or they ate fish, right?
They might. Maybe they painted their toenails green. I don't know. But go find out. What are the most common characteristics? And if you look at data around the success factors versus the failure factors, you may get a different answer. And I do not know, and I'm sure there may be out there, I don't know of any significant research by any drug company, and certainly not by a lot of the universities, who are looking at the cohort group where it was successful. Where's the reward in it?
So we're, in effect, impeding innovation because we're not providing rewards.
There's no financial incentive to go do that. There's a financial incentive to find a drug that has some impact. I totally get it.
Yeah.
But where's the motivation to go do the common factors, common characteristics?
Couldn't you almost equate this, though, and this is kind of to what we did in the 60s with the space race, where we put our best and brightest together through NASA, through private corporations, through whatever, to race for that creativity to build something that we didn't even know if we could do it. 9 years later or 10 years later, they're on the moon. I mean,
so I just wrote an article that just got published, exactly that same thing. 400,000 people after a mission to put a persons on the moon.
Right.
And all of the disparate things, whether it's the suit, that food,
right,
the use of oxygen, the ergonomics of that,
yes, sir,
all had to come together. Francis, you're dead on the money. If you go and look at, I think we published it on LinkedIn, but I'm
going to check it out. I am.
And we'll share that in our notes for our listeners.
What we're doing now, it's the same thing. Let's get our best and bright. Let's stop trying to build the next cool app. Let's start helping and having impact on people, because it's going to somehow benefit us all. We might not know it today,
right?
But there's going to be benefit to all of us. Just like with the technology that came out from the space, right? There's things we're using now that were developed in the 60s and 70s.
Absolutely.
So that's good. I mean, that's refreshing. Can you tell us how people get in contact with CereHealth or CereScan? What can they do to find more information about the offerings that you guys have?
So a great educational site is www.CereScan, and it's CERE, and scan, SCAN.com.
Okay.
And that's a great site to go to.
Thanks for listening. The Mavericks want to hear from you. Visit us on Facebook and Instagram at Mavericks of Senior Living or mavericksofseniorliving.com and leave us your comments, questions, and ideas for future podcasts.